Hello everyone, and welcome back to my channel. I am coming to you from Sevilla in Spain, my first time here. I'm here for nearly 4 days. So I arrived last night on Wednesday evening about 10 p.m. I'm about to hit the ground running. My first stop on my agenda is the Real Alcázar Palace, which is supposed to be one of the most visited attractions in Sevilla. And then from there, we're gonna see what else we get up to. I've booked about one ticketed thing and a couple tours in the evenings each day. So I've got kept the agenda quite loose, but I have a huge wish list of the things that I want to see and do in Sevilla. So this video is going to be all about what I get up to on my trip over those days. I might break it into multiple videos depending on how much content I film, but either way, let's jump in and go check out Sevilla. So my first stop of the day was the Real Alcázar of Sevilla. And this is the Royal Palace in Sevilla. And it's actually been a royal residence since the 11th century. And the history goes that it began as a Moorish fortress built in 913 and has been expanded by monarchs over the centuries. It's one of the oldest palaces in continuous use in Europe. And yes, actually, if you were wondering, Spanish royalty still stays at this palace when they come to visit in Sevilla. Now the palace itself is massive, so definitely factor in a few hours to visit. I also recommend bringing your own bottled water with you, because if you're there on a hot day, a lot of the year Sevilla is really warm, so you're definitely going to want probably your own water and maybe even some snacks as well if you really want to spend a few hours there. So a couple other interesting facts about the palace. So the name Alcázar actually comes from the Arabic Alcázar, meaning fortress or palace. And the complex was actually developed during Muslim rule and later adapted by Christian kings, making it a symbol of Sevilla's more layered history, which I think is quite interesting as well. When you go through and you look at the different architectural touches, you really can see the mix of Islamic versus Christian. And actually, interestingly, going a little bit deeper on that point, Pedro I, which he was a 14th century Christian king in Sevilla, he actually employed Muslim artisans to build parts of the palace in a I'm not going to be able to pronounce this correctly, but it's a M-U-D-E-J-A-R style, Medellín style. I'm not so sure. My Spanish is terrible. And it's actually really an interesting example of cultural coexistence where Islamic artistry actually flourished under Christian rule. And even when you look at kind of some of the inscriptions throughout the palace, there are Arabic inscriptions praising Allah, and they sit besides Christian symbols in the walls and tiles. So it's quite interesting. And then when you walk through the palace, each room marks a different moment in history. So there are kind of Gothic halls that were added after the Christian conquest to the Renaissance, which were touches of Charles V. So you really, when you go through, there's little placards with each room that tells you kind of the symbolism of the room as well. Now, I have to say the gardens were one of my absolute favorite parts of the palace. It's so stunning. This is why you really want to spend quite a few hours here. The gardens actually span over 60,000 square meters, and they include fountains, hedge mazes, pavilions, even wild peacocks roaming the grounds. So this was definitely a highlight of my visit, and something where if you are with kind of family or friends, definitely want to take a lot of pictures. But let's go a little bit more into some bits of the palace. So there's a couple other interesting things when you explore the interior. So sunlight is actually also used as a design element. So the palace itself and the gardens were actually designed for the heat in the region. So light bounces off the tiled surfaces. They have water features which cool the air, and shade is very artfully created. So you do feel like this when you're wandering around both the palace and the gardens. So even though it is kind of recommended not to visit it in the heat of the day if you can avoid it, I think I actually disregarded this and was visiting like 1 or 2 o'clock in the afternoon, and it was actually okay, but keep in mind that I was there in October. So yeah, but it is a UNESCO World Heritage Site, and it really is just a wonderful testimony to cultural exchange and kind of the heritage of medieval Spain. So I really, really love that. Another fun fact, it was also a filming location for Game of Thrones. So if you are a kind of a Game of Thrones fans, you might recognize some of the gardens and some of the dramatic archways. So maybe before your visit, you could do a little research on that to know exactly where, if you really want to document that. I also should mention that it is a living archaeological site as well, which is quite spectacular. And excavations beneath the palace have revealed Roman ruins and older Islamic structures, which is quite special, showing the site has been really in continuous use and transformation for over 1,000 years, which is just so remarkable. So yeah, what I recommend is, I didn't go on a guided tour. I just decided to wander and do a self-tour. I really just took my time with each room. I read all of the signage for kind of what each room symbolizes. I really love to geek out on history. So for me, the mix of like Muslim and Islamic history with Christian history and architecture was so interesting to me. And I loved the gardens. I just thought every corner there was something new to see. It just felt magical. And then there is kind of an underground baths as well, which you do need to look up where those are, but I would definitely say if you can see where those are, I'll make sure to mention that again when they're on screen. But yeah, every room, every area, there's just so many wonderful design elements to take in. This here, I think, is the golden dome of the Ambassadors Hall, which is a crown jewel of the palace, and it was really meant to impress visiting dignitaries. I mean, I'm not a dignitary, but it really impressed me. And basically, it's a geometric perfection, and colorful mosaics symbolize divine order and power. So yeah, I could totally see how this would be impressive. It really is a showstopper, and people really do linger in this room. So yeah, I cannot recommend enough to visit this palace. I think it really took me by surprise, and it ended up being my hands down favorite attraction in Sevilla. So definitely add it to your list. And some tips I would say on visiting is definitely buy your tickets in advance, because you can see how incredible it is. It's no surprise that it's one of Sevilla's busiest attractions. And on the day that I went to visit, there actually were signs at the door saying that it was sold out for the day. So I always like, when I travel, to book 1 or 2 ticketed things at very different parts of the day. But yeah, just making the point, definitely pre-book, definitely pack some water and snacks. And just really linger and enjoy your time here. I know for sure I did. So after an incredible visit at the Real Alcázar, I was really hungry. I didn't completely factor in the length of time it would be needed to see the palace properly. So I wandered down the road just in search of something lovely, and I found myself at a place called El Pinton, which is a very kind of highly rated restaurant in Sevilla. I ended up grabbing an outdoor seat. They offered me outdoor or indoor, and I just sat outside for a lovely glass of rosé and a tuna tartare with avocado, and I liked it so much I ordered a second order of it. So that was just a really great lunch, and The restaurant's theme is Mediterranean cuisine, and I think it would be so good to try out for lunch or dinner. Refueled after lunch, I then decided to head to Plaza de Espana, which is kind of like this Disney fairy tale-esque plaza. It really is a showstopper. It was built in 1928 for the Ibero-American Exposition of 1929, which was a world fair, and it was meant to celebrate the ties between Spain, Latin America, and the United States. And it was meant to impress, and I can see why. It is really touristy, is what I would say. I feel like because it's free and just open, you can get a lot of overcrowding there. However, let's go into a little bit of this amazing architecture. It does blend Renaissance, Baroque, and Moorish Revival architecture, and it has this uniquely Andalusian flair. It's in a semicircle shape, and it is kind of a nod to Spain and its former colonies. So along the curved facade, there are 48 tiled alcoves, one for each Spanish province, and then each features maps, coats of arms, and scenes from local history. So it is a beautiful walkable history lesson. So maybe in this sense, it might make sense to do a tour if that's really interesting to you, to really dig in a bit more. And you also can't help but feel a little bit of like a Venetian vibe to it with the canals and the boats in there. So there is a canal running through the plaza, and you can rent these little rowboats, which is really quite fabulous. And that's why it's kind of known as the Venice of Sevilla. So just a few more fun facts on the plaza. So the 4 bridges that are like the little Venice also symbolize kind of the 4 kingdoms of Spain, which I didn't know about. And then movie buffs will also really appreciate that one of the Star Wars films was filmed here, as well as Lawrence of Arabia. So if you do want to see exactly where or recreate some photos from movie scenes, you should definitely look that up before you visit. And then as mentioned, it is free to visit all day. I did mention it does get really crowded with tourists. So I think if you don't like crowds like I don't, maybe don't visit it in the middle of the day. Maybe try and look for some really early morning or off-peak times. And obviously, because it's free and it has such wonderful symbolism and history, is very much worth a visit if you go to Sevilla. So at this point, I had had a very long day and I was tired and overheating a bit. I decided to go up to my hotel. Hotel Giralda had this amazing rooftop pool. I've already done a hotel review, so I'll leave it linked down below, but I really love this hotel. Was very easy walking distance from the center of Sevilla. Great breakfast, great rooftop pool, really spacious modern room. So this was just a great overall stay. And yeah, what's not to like about the rooftop pool vibes at this hotel? Absolutely fabulous. So after my time at the hotel pool, I went and had a quick shower, got changed for the evening, and I went to my evening ticketed attraction. And I went to the Setas de Sevilla, which is kind of called the mushrooms of Sevilla. And they're called this for their quirky umbrella-like shape. And I thought it might be quite special to go see them during the golden hour time. So I did book a ticketed time slot, which I would recommend. It was really magical and honestly like a bit romantic. So if you're kind of on a trip with a significant other, I feel like this would be a great thing to do before dinner. So let's go into a little bit about these structures. So they are the largest wooden structure in the world, and it was developed as a revitalization of a plaza that was kind of like a neglected parking lot for many years. And the goal was to create a new landmark that would reconnect the area to locals and tourists alike. It was designed by a German architect called Jürgen Meyer, and he won an international architectural competition in 2004. And his vision was actually to create a cathedral without walls, and essentially wanted it to be a meeting point where Sevilla's past, present, and future could intersect. Now, the mushrooms are free to see from the bottom, but if you do want to go up to the top, you do need to pay a ticket. There is an elevator that takes you to the top, which is great. Now, They are a little bit controversial in Sevilla. So the construction began in 2005. It was finished in 2011. It was unfortunately over budget and delayed due to some technical and archaeological challenges. And at first the locals were skeptical, but apparently over time they warmed to it as a symbol of the city's contemporary creativity. But maybe if you're in Sevilla, you should ask some locals what they think. I actually didn't get a chance to do that. And it was inspired by Sevilla's trees and vaults. So the parasols are essentially in this lattice style, which you can see here on screen, as well as the gorgeous golden hour views. And they do provide shade down below, but they also create this airy sculptural canopy that changes with the light throughout the day. And then in the golden hour in the evening, there's obviously some lighting that adds to the dramatic effect of them. And you know, as I mentioned, going up to the top during the golden hour for the sunset was so magical. I love seeing the 360-degree views of the city. And as kind of the light changes, you start to see kind of the city coming to life and sparkling a bit. It really is just a wonderful viewpoint, and you can see why people linger up there for really good lengths of time. Just, I think it's nice when you travel, there can always be this pressure to like go, go, go. But with this, you're just walking through a walking path, so you can linger, you can relax, you can just really savor the moment, which I think is something we don't always think about as much in travel. Like when I was in the Real Alcázar, I just kept wanting to see like one room after the next room after the next room. And it felt so big, I wanted to get through it, whereas this I could really sit and linger a bit. And if you are able-bodied, I do actually recommend walking down the stairs instead of taking the elevator down, because as you descend down, there's all of these educational points about the architecture and the construction of the Setas de Sevilla. And I found it just really fascinating. So if you are an architecture geek, definitely do this, because you can learn about like the type of wood, the architecture. You can see some pictures of the different parts of the construction and the symbolism of it. I really like how they thought about every element of the experience. And then beneath the Setas is the Antiquarium, which is an archaeological museum showcasing the Roman mosaics as well. I actually didn't get a chance to do this, but like literally it just goes to show what a wonderful historic city Sevilla is. I like the layers to it run deep, literally. And yeah, just as we're looking at kind of this last little light show, the structure does use over 3,000 laminated timber pieces joined by steel and glue. So it really is, again, just this wonderful architectural feat. And as you can tell, this really surprised me in a good way as well. So when I recommend what to do in Sevilla, this comes up really high on my list of things to do. So I feel like my theme for the day is I was just often like quite hungry. So after dinner, I just stumbled upon a little wine bar, literally steps from the Setas de Sevilla. Now my Spanish pronunciation is terrible, but it's called Vinoteca Llama la Uva, which I will leave this and everything I've mentioned linked down below. I got myself a Spanish rosé, and then I browsed the menu and I had one of these kind of traditional bread soups that the staff mentioned, which had some jamón in it. So good. It's actually like tomato and bread with a little bit of jamón. It's just simple, lovely pleasures. They put some like free, like little kind of crunchy, crackery bread snacks that came with it. And then I decided to be a little naughty. I had this kind of duck and foie gras kind of tapas style dish, which was also very decadent. I didn't want a huge dinner, but I did love kind of just having something a bit richer, different flavors. This was kind of the perfect mix of food for me. And then I walked back to Hotel Giralda and I stumbled upon this church where there was an event going on and some musical performances. So I stopped to linger and enjoy that. I just think with Sevilla, there's just always something wonderful going on. And I was on my own for this trip. I did a solo trip and no one bothered me. Everyone was so wonderful. You know, I dined alone. a couple times on this day at like little sidewalk or outdoor cafes, and the place I went for dinner, they were just so nice in helping me, steering me on the menu. I always felt really safe. You know, I do talk about this more in my Hotel Giralda video because I did walk kind of 15 minutes from most of the city center to the hotel, and some of the streets were kind of dark. So I was originally a bit, and even in the city center, there's all these narrow little roads which are quite dark. So I think as a woman traveling alone, sometimes that kind of pulls your senses where you worry about safety. But to be honest, no one bothered me. I felt fine throughout, but it was just a little bit of an adjustment getting used to, just because we always think about, oh, dark, quiet roads as potentially scary. I mean, one night I walked home between two like elderly ladies just having a lovely casual stroll. So I think it is a pretty safe city, but also, you know, I'm really careful when I travel. I don't drink much. I tend to eat on the earlier side. I don't stay out very late at night, so I always take a lot of safety precautions. And there are kind of taxis, and Uber did work in Sevilla as well, so you could also do that as an option. But that wraps up my first day in Sevilla. I am gonna do this as like a how I'll do the Sevilla series is I'll do a video per day. I might merge like the last 2 days if there's not enough content, and then I'll do a roundup video which shows everything I did. So hopefully that helps if you're planning a trip. And if you have any questions, please leave a comment down below, or if you have any tips on what you loved about Sevilla, please leave a comment. I always say sharing is caring here on this channel, and people are so wonderful in giving with their advice and their opinions and tips. If you like this video, please hit the like button. That really helps my channel. And last but certainly not least, I would love it if you would consider subscribing and joining me on this wonderful YouTube journey. I make travel and lifestyle videos, you know, my travels, my life in London, some of my other kind of things that I'm enjoying. So thanks again for tuning in, and I will see you soon.